problem. Mr. Chairman, real credit to the private sector has recorded negative growth recently. As at May 2015, the annual flow of credit to the private sector was 4.5 billion Ghana cedis, or $1.7 billion. For the same period in 2016, the yearly flow of credit from banks to the private sector declined from the 4.5 billion last year to 1.7 billion Ghana cedis, or around $445 million. This is the extent to which the private sector activity has been deprived. You see this major drop in credit to the private sector. And this condition is affecting the economic fortunes of many businesses, including the creation of jobs and the growth to boost the economy. Making this bad situation worse is the inability of some public institutions to service their indebtedness to the banking industry. By some estimations, these public institutions are indebted to the banks to the tune of 4.4 to 5% of GDP, and this will require careful monitoring to avoid an explosive situation. The situation of the poor state of microfinance companies is equally of critical importance given the role they play in our economy in supporting micro business. I now turn to the issue of policy, the loss of policy credibility. Mr. Chairman, one of the reasons the John Mahama government has given for requesting the IMF bailout was to help it regain policy credibility. 2 years after the IMF program, however, the government's policy credibility is still in tatters, if not worse. The recent attempted Eurobond issue is an example of the loss of policy credibility. After 4 successive Eurobond issues in 2007, 2013, 2014, and 2015, the attempt by government to issue another Eurobond in 2016 was rebuffed by investors who have become increasingly skeptical of the Ghana story. So the government wanted to issue a 10-year Eurobond, and basically it was rebuffed. The warning should have been on the wall when in 2015, even with a World Bank guarantee, for which we paid 0.75%, Ghana's bond was priced at a very high 10.75%. Without a World Bank guarantee and with the third board review of Ghana's IMF program in limbo, it was inevitable that Ghana would be asked to pay a very high price for the 2016 Eurobond. Mr. Chairman, several credibility issues have manifested recently. Firstly, the government appears to have reneged on its understandings it had with the IMF with regards to the recently passed Bank of Ghana Act and the Public Financial Management Act. This quite clearly is bad faith and undermines the credibility of government. If you read the IMF reports, when they came in recently, they basically pointed to the fact that they had understandings with the government which were breached. There is also the big question of the use of the $1 billion Eurobond proceeds. The prospectus to the Eurobond issue clearly specified that the money was to be used specifically, what the money was to be used for. Specifically, the prospectus states that, and I quote, "The Republic expects the net proceeds of the issue of the notes to amount to approximately some $958 million, which the Republic expects to utilize to repay outstanding domestic debt of the Republic." So it was very clear what this 1 billion Eurobond was to be used for: repay the outstanding domestic debt. What is clear now is that the government did not quite use the proceeds for that purpose. In what is a clear admission that this is in fact the case, the Minister of Finance, during a press conference on August 24, 2016, stated that out of the 1 billion Eurobond, and I'll quote this because it's important that we try to understand what the minister is saying. He said that out of the $1 million Eurobond, we just spent about 500 million. and carried the remaining 500 million as buffer as we go into zero financing, so that when we have an uncovered auction, we are able to use the World Bank money, which we should have used entirely for domestic, to get into that policy, to ride on that policy. If you understand what exactly the minister is trying to say, what the minister has admitted is quite unbelievable. You go to the international capital market to borrow at 10.75% and decide to park those funds as idle funds in the Bank of Ghana or maybe in UBA, just in case you have an auction failure. So why borrow funds at such a high rate if you have no use for them? Why? Why borrow funds at such a high rate if you have no use for them? It is very bad economic management, pure and simple. The government simply used the bond proceeds to finance its deficit rather than refinancing the debt as it said it would in the prospectus to the bond issue. This undermines credibility. As a result of the lack of policy credibility, Ghana is now having to borrow at very high interest rates on the Eurobond market, and it's amongst the highest in the world. And this is not only affecting government, it's also affecting the interest rates that the private sector is able to raise on the international market. Figure 15. The next figure shows that when Ghana issued its first Eurobond under the n.p.p. government in 2007, the spread, which is the difference between the interest rate on the Eurobond and US Treasuries of similar tenor, when we issued that first Eurobond, the spread was only 3.7%. This spread is really the premium that investors demand over and above prevailing interbank interest rates. It is really a measure of a borrower's risk. The lower the number for the premium paid, the higher the credit readiness of the borrower and vice versa. The second and third bonds were issued under the NDC in 2013 and 2014 at higher spreads of 5.4% and 5.72% respectively. Ironically, our credit worthiness has been decreasing since we became an oil exporting country. In 2015, notwithstanding a World Bank guarantee, the spread was the highest so far at 8.34%. Clearly, confidence in the management of our economy has eroded in the eyes of the international investor community as the years have gone by under the NDC's economic management. It comes therefore as no surprise that our fifth Eurobond, which was rejected by the market when the government tried to borrow for 10 years. Today, as we speak, contrary to its stated objectives, government of borrowing long term, the government has been telling us, the minister has been telling us they are trying to shift the yield curve to the longer end of the market and they are borrowing long term, right? Today, as we speak, contrary to its stated objectives of borrowing long term, the government is now being forced by the market to borrow short to medium terms for 5 years against the stated objective. So today, Ghana has issued a bond in the London markets for $750 million for a 5-year tenor at a price of over 9%. And so the spread, again, for the 5-year tenor is about 8%, which is so high. It's very expensive money. When we just got out of HIPIC, we borrowed for 10 years at 8.5%. Now, after being an oil-producing country for 5 years, middle-income country, we now can only borrow at 5 years, but now for over 9%. Did we come or did we go? What we know is that Ghana attracted the highest interest rates on its borrowings amongst its peers in sub-Saharan Africa. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the price we are paying for mismanagement and incompetence under this NDC government. If you look at this, you will see that Ghana, amongst its peers, has the highest spreads. It's the highest spreads, higher than... I think that was the president saying he wasn't borrowing to drink tea. He will borrow more. Mr. Chairman, President John Dramani Mahama and the NDC government have also made several statements which have either turned out to be untrue or are contradictory. Either way, they have served to undermine the credibility of government and of its economic management team. These include the denial that government would ask for a bailout from the IMF, the promises to end doomsaw, the flip-flops on ECG privatization, the promise to put cash in the pockets of Ghanaians, the denial that civil servants are likely to be laid off under a rationalization program to be implemented in 2017, the promise by President Mahama not to make any more promises. So one is no longer sure what to believe. Mr. Chairman, we turn to unemployment. Mr. Chairman, the net result of the economic policies of the John Mahama government is that the resulting declining growth of the economy is the unprecedented joblessness that afflicts our people today, and the apparent inability of government to find an urgent remedy to boost and produce the jobs we urgently need. Declining growth, doomsaw, high electricity and utility bills, high interest rates, the massive exchange rate depreciation, high government debt, which has crowded out the private sector, rising non-p.p loans, rising corruption, declining business confidence, and so on, have all contributed to high unemployment in Ghana. And the World Bank reports that youth unemployment in Ghana is 48%. The increasing unemployment in the country is a ticking time bomb, but the government has been bereft of ideas to create jobs. JIDA, for example, was used as a vehicle to siphon public funds and not for job creation. Mr. Chairman, as we approach an election year, the government has been trying to find explanation for this dismal economic performance. So we have now seen an engagement in a search for excuses. Mr. Chairman, rather than admitting its culpability for the dire situation of this economy, President John Mahama and the NDC government have resorted to providing various excuses for their failure. The excuses include the following. The NDC has argued that Ghana's economic problems are the result of the decline in international commodity prices. Haven't you heard this argument? However, Mr. Chairman, the evidence does not support this assertion. In fact, contrary to what they would have us believe, this government has benefited from relatively positive international commodity price movements for gold and cocoa. Very positive. Let's take cocoa. Under the n.p.p, that is between 2001 and 2008, cocoa prices ranged between $965 to $3,021 per ton. The n.p.p enjoyed cocoa prices and a new 600-bed teaching hospital by the University of Ghana, however, is $30 million less than the cost of renovating and expanding the Ridge Hospital from 200 bed to 420 bed. How possible is this? Indeed, given the resources at its disposal, one should expect at least 4 to 5 times the quantum of investment that the NDC claims to have undertaken. The close to 33 billion of borrowing that has not been used for infrastructure expenditure could have done so much in this country. If you take $33 billion and ask yourself, what could you have done with $33 billion? You could have solved the water crisis in Ghana. You could have solved our energy problems. Every region in Ghana would have had 1,000 kilometers of asphalt road. We could have transformed agriculture. We could have put in place a world-class hospital in every region. We could have bought 1,000 ambulances for the Ghana Ambulance Service. We could have equipped our existing health and education institutions. And we could have built an additional 600 senior high schools that the government is trying to build currently. And we could have constructed the Accra-Kumasi-Paga railway line as well as the Western Railway line. And with all this, we would have still been left with some money. Mr. Chairman, the second reason why I say the NDC is attempting to hoodwink Ghanaians with claims of massive infrastructure investments is that the investment in infrastructure has actually been on the decline. Yes, investment in infrastructure in Ghana is on the decline, as I showed in a graph earlier. It is, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence shows that notwithstanding the massive increase in debt, the stock of capital expenditure as a percentage of GDP has actually been on the decline, and it has come down from an average of 11% during 2001 to 2008 to 5.7%. So you see this major decline in infrastructure spending from 11% average to 5.7% average. This means that contrary to all the government claims of an increase in infrastructure projects all over the country, the reality is that Ghana's expenditure on infrastructure relative to GDP is declining. The numbers indicate that government is investing about half what the n.p.p. government used to invest. And this is a government that has discovered oil. But the government that did not have oil is investing twice as much relative to GDP than the government that had oil. Mr. Chairman, the third reason why I say the NDC is attempting to hoodwink Ghanaians with claims of massive infrastructure investment is that as I have stated, most of these investments are overpriced. Every project that it has... Mr. Chairman, every project that it has undertaken whose cost has been inflated means job losses. If the building of the teachers' bungalow in Dambai can cost 5 times more under the NDC than under the n.p.p., then it explains why the NDC kills jobs. It means that 4 bungalows could have been built if someone like Nana Akufo-Addo had been president. It means that 4 times more building workers could have been employed and earned incomes from that money that went instead to corrupt practices. It means 4 times more teachers would have been employed and housed in Dambai. Ladies and gentlemen, leadership is ultimately about choices. One leader may prefer one village, one dam, whilst another may prefer one chief, one car. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, the fourth reason why I say that the NDC is attempting to hoodwink Ghanaians with claims of massive infrastructural investments is that, in fact, all governments in the past have done infrastructure projects. There's no government in Ghana, including the military governments, all of them have done infrastructure projects. Indeed, in terms of projects accomplished relative to resources available, the n.p.p. government of 2001 to 2008 under President John Agyekum Kufuor has a very impressive record. Very impressive. And I will come to that record shortly. Indeed, it was His Excellency President Mahama who told us in 2008 that any government touting infrastructure projects as its achievements is engaging in an exercise in mediocrity. So, what has changed? Ladies and gentlemen, the fifth reason why I say the NDC is attempting to hoodwink Ghanaians with claims of massive infrastructure investment is that infrastructure investment is not supposed to be for its own sake, but to increase productivity and production in the economy. The proof of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating. If you have undertaken massive infrastructure investment and unprecedented infrastructure investment, then why is the economy in trouble? And this is why I was saying much earlier when I began, that if a farmer tells you that, oh, they've not been able to produce the corn, but they have used a lot of fertilizer, then you know they are not a very good farmer. The facts show that the impact of NDC infrastructure investments have not been translated to increased output, job creation, better living conditions for the people of Ghana. It is like a man who has been given lots of money and decides to build a big story building with no roof. Meanwhile, his children are hungry. He cannot pay school fees, health care, electricity bills, and so on. And when the children complain, he tells them that he has laid a good foundation for them. In contrast, Mr. Chairman, in contrast, the n.p.p. government in 2001 to 2008 undertook significant infrastructure investments across the country in several sectors. In the area of water, for example, the Cape Coast Water Project, Tamale, Adansege, Winneba, Berkese, Weja, Bafi Krom, Akuapem Ridge, Akimodan, Koforidua, New Tafu, Winneba Expansion, Kwanyako, Bojoasi, Grimswich Dredging, Secondary Takrade Expansion, Kumasi Expansion, East-West Accra Interconnection. These are such some of the water projects. Then you have in education, construction of the campuses for the University of Development Studies in UDS, Yankpala, Navrongo, and Wa, construction of the Bolga Polytechnic, the Wa Polytechnic, established the University of Mines and Technology. 38 teacher training colleges were upgraded to diploma awarding institutions. 56 model senior schools were started and 31 were completed. 31 lecture theater halls at various university campuses. The medical school at the University of Cape Coast was established. In health facilities were numerous. As I said, if you go to roads, the roads is a remarkable record. Accra, Yamoransa, Accra, Flao, Kejebu, Pepesu, Mansu, Asankragwa, Exim Junction, Takwa, Abuakwa, Bibiane, Tinga Bole, Pantai Manfi, Bangjo, Uraura, Wenchi Sampa, Tamale Yendi, Malam Interchange, Tetakwashi, Malam, Jessica Mbronkese, Exim Junction, Takwa, Pantang Manfi, Tetakwashi Interchange, Ashama Motorway, Achimota Interchange, Alajo Avano, Asafo Interchange, Ofanko Sawam, Apejo Bunsu, Bunsu Enyinam, Enyinam Konongo, Konongo Enijusu. Mr. Chairman, this is just a sample. I have not finished. We built the West African gas pipeline, the Bui Dam. The construction of the 132 megawatt plant at Obuasi, the Takoradi T1 plant was initiated. The 220 Sunon Asogli plant was completed towards the end of the Kufuor administration. We built Jubilee House, Flagstaff House. We constructed world-class stadia in Accra and Kumasi. We built a new stadia in Esipong and Tamale, Jubilee Parks in all regional capitals, Accra Tema Commuter Railway, Peduasi Lodge rehabilitation of Tamale, Kumasi, and Takoradi airports. Mr. Chairman, let me make this point in regards to the rehabilitation of the airports. During Cannes 2008, flights flew directly from South Africa and Senegal to Tamale and took off directly. Directly from South Africa and Senegal to Tamale. This was in 2008. And today we are being deceived into thinking that they need to spend $100 million to fly pilgrims to the Hajj. Mr. President, of course, the key difference between the NDC and the n.p.p, however, is that the impact of the n.p.p's infrastructure investment, along with the structural reforms and prudent economic policies of President J. Kufuor, was felt positively in the economy. And let me tell you how it was felt positively. We saw an increase in GDP growth. This is what infrastructure investment is supposed to do, to help you grow the economy. We saw an increase in GDP growth from 3.7% to 9.1%. Reduction in corporate taxes to boost business growth. A massive increase in cocoa production. The National Youth Employment Program was established. The school feeding program was established. Capitation grant was established. National Health Insurance Scheme. Free maternal care. Metro mass transit. Introduction of the Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty. And yes, we were HIPIC and we were paying teacher training allowances and nursing training allowances. You also saw a massive expansion of the financial sector. Mr. Chairman, what this goes to show is that infrastructure investment alone is not sufficient to drive an economy. You need to manage an economy with competence and to keep corruption under check if you are going to make progress. So now that we have dealt with the infrastructure excuse, let us now go to yet another excuse that the President Mahama has been giving us. Mr. Chairman, another argument that the President Mahama has been making recently is that the last 8 years have been spent building a good foundation, despite what he terms as challenges, and that the economy is now ready to take off. Brighter days are just around the corner, especially with the coming on stream of production of oil from the TEN and Sankofa oil fields. Mr. Chairman, we should note that the brighter days are just ahead mantra has been repeated by this John Mahama government since 2009. Ghana has always had opportunities which make prospects look bright. The problem, however, is not the prospects, but the management of the opportunities to realize the prospects. When Ghana discovered oil in 2007, there was a lot of euphoria about brighter days ahead. The World Bank, the IMF, the ratings agencies, Economist Intelligence Unit, all similarly predicted brighter days ahead for Ghana. But after 8 years of NDC government, today our economy is in decline, and we are a country at high risk of debt distress depending on the IMF for a bailout. Where did the brighter days go? The fact is, you cannot achieve brighter days with mismanagement, incompetence, and corruption. President Mahama has talked about brighter days ahead every year since 2012, but it is all talk. What we have been given are dark days. Dark days with doomsor, unemployment, high taxes, high utility prices, and high cost of living. The opportunity offered by the Jubilee oil discovery has been squandered by poor management, and Ghanaians are now being asked to give the new opportunity offered by the 10 and Sankofa oil fields to the same president and the same government who mismanaged the opportunity of Jubilee. An interesting question, Mr. Chairman, an interesting question to ask is what foundation has been laid that is going to bring about the brighter future? What foundation has been laid? Is it doomsor? Is it the declining growth? Is it declining agriculture and manufacturing output? Is it the high unemployment? Is it the high taxes? Is it the high cost of living? Is it the financial sector fragility? Is it the rising interest rates or the collapsed currency? Is it the declining business confidence? Is it SADA or JIDA or Wyoming or Smarties or Ameri or Embraer or Car Power? Or is it the fourth expedition from Burkina Faso? Mr. Chairman, how can President Mahama call this legacy a strong foundation? But haven't we heard about laying a strong foundation before? We should recall, Mr. Chairman, that on August 30th, 2012, President Mahama stated during his acceptance speech in Sunyani that, and I quote, "The government for the past 3.5 years has been laying a strong foundation for transformational takeoff of the country's development." This is in August 2012, and they had been laying that strong foundation for 3 years. Now, on December 5th, 2012, his information minister said, "We want to invest in jobs and in people, in the economy, which is part of the prevailing Better Ghana agenda. We have already laid the foundation. We have taken off, and we want to soar." Then, the NDC 2012 manifesto states, "This manifesto is based on the achievements over the last 4 years, during which period we established a firm foundation for delivering a program of economic recovery and sustained welfare of the people of Ghana." So according to President Mahama and the NDC, they had laid a solid foundation between 2008 and 2012, and the country had taken off. In 2016, President Mahama is again telling us, and he just did yesterday in Cape Coast, or the day before in Cape Coast. President Mahama is again telling us that he has now laid a very solid foundation and is ready for takeoff. Mr. Chairman, so after laying the foundation and taking off in 2012, 1 year later in 2013, President Mahama is telling us that he spent 2013 to lay yet another foundation. And in 2016, he's telling us that he has yet spent 2014 to 2016 to lay another solid foundation. How many foundations is the president going to lay? How can you go back to build a foundation after you have supposedly taken off? They really must think that we have short memories or that we do not read. In fact, if you allow President Mahama to another term, he will come back in 2020 to tell you he has laid yet another foundation. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. The fact is that the worst period of economic performance since 2001, the worst period of economic performance since 2001 has been under President Mahama's stewardship between 2012 and 2016. The truth is that the foundation was already laid by the Kufuor government. President Mahama has spent the last 8 years destroying the foundation and replacing it with a weak foundation of straw, which he desperately tries to portray it as one of concrete. A mason who inherits a good foundation and spends 8 years destroying it cannot be trusted to build a house. We need a competent mason, one with integrity, credibility, and vision to build the house. Mr. Chairman, the economic situation that the John Mahama government has put us into is dire. The problems cannot be solved by personal insults, by distributing cars, bus branding, or propaganda. The real issues ought to be seriously addressed. So what is the way forward? Mr. Chairman, looking ahead, our goal for the economy is simple: to build the most business-friendly and the most people-friendly economy in Africa, which will create jobs and prosperity for all Ghanaians. We will create jobs and prosperity for all Ghanaians. To do this, we have to address head-on the economic challenges that confront our economy. These include macroeconomic instability, the banking sector fragility, unsustainable debt, unemployment, the energy crisis. We need to empower the private sector. We need inclusive growth and higher infrastructure expenditure relative to GDP. We need to increase agricultural productivity. We need to industrialize. We need to bring down the high interest rates, stabilize the exchange rate, and provide more credit to the private sector. So in the area of restoring macroeconomic stability, Mr. Chairman, the n.p.p. will restore macroeconomic stability through the pursuit of sound economic policies in the context of an enhanced institutional framework to underpin macroeconomic stability. Macroeconomic stability is built around 3 pillars, which is monetary discipline, fiscal discipline, and financial stability. To reinforce monetary discipline, the Bank of Ghana Act established the Monetary Policy Committee to guide the implementation of monetary policy. The 2 other pillars, which is fiscal discipline and financial stability, have no such institutional anchors. Fiscal discipline has, however, been the bane of economic management in Ghana. To address this, the International Monetary Fund insisted on the passage of the Public Financial Management Act. However, the recent Public Financial Management Act passed is woefully inadequate. because it lacks the key elements that will protect the pairs from abuse. Fiscal policy implementation, as it stands now in Ghana, lacks three basic elements. There's an absence of a transparent framework or an institutional arrangements for providing quality fiscal information to the public. Absence of an accountability mechanism that ensures that officialdom is held accountable in implementing optimal fiscal policies. An absence of a well-set-up institution to ensure the credibility of fiscal projections provided by the government. To address this problem, the n.p.p. will pass a fiscal responsibility law to bring comprehensiveness, accountability, and stability to the entire budgeting process. In this context, a fiscal council will be set up with the appropriate legal backing to contribute to the accountability of government, and which will also be responsible for setting up medium-term fiscal policy anchors. Mr. Chairman, in this year's State of the Nation address, President Mahama attributed the problems emanating from the collapse of the microfinance institutions like DKM and God is Love to the failure of banking supervision. From what we know today, this is only the tip of the iceberg. At least 8 banks in Ghana today are on the verge of collapse if something is not done urgently. The financial stability pillar of the macroeconomic framework has been weakened under this government. To address this over the long term, the n.p.p. will establish a financial stability council akin to the proposed fiscal council, which is then grounded in law, and its mandate, amongst others, will include assessing vulnerabilities affecting the financial system and identify and oversee actions needed to address them. So we will give financial stability an institutional anchor, just like we have monetary stability with the Monetary Policy Committee. We will undertake financial sector reform and deepen our financial markets to promote financial inclusion. We will implement the strategy of repositioning Ghana as an international financial services center within the sub-region. We will formalize the economy through the establishment of a national database using the National Identification System. This government, for 8 years, has been unable to issue national ID cards. The n.p.p. will do it in our first year of government. First year, we will issue national ID cards. Mr. Chairman, on job creation, the key to job creation in our present circumstances has to be a change in government to allow for more competent management of the economy. In the area of economic management, the n.p.p. will assemble a team of experts with diverse skills to implement our economic plan. The first transformation from that Ghanaians will witness will be the transformation from the incompetence under John Mahama's NDC to the competence under the n.p.p. with Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. To address the issue of unemployment, the n.p.p. will implement a number of policy reforms. These include a reform to shift the focus of economic management from taxation to production. Mr. Chairman, the mismanagement of the economy under this John Mahama government has resulted in an increase in taxes on virtually everything taxable. This has increased the burden on the private sector and is a disincentive for production. High taxes also increase the cost of living for Ghanaians. Many of the taxes that have been imposed are nuisance taxes. They are nuisance taxes whose yield is quite low, but whose burden on business and on individuals is quite high. To address these challenges, the n.p.p. will shift the focus of the economy away from taxation and towards production. So we are going to implement a number of tax reforms, and you are going to see the energy of the private sector unleashed as a result. Under the n.p.p., you all remember that under the n.p.p., we reduced taxes, corporate taxes, from 35% to 25%. We had a program to get it to 20%, but we lost power. So when we come, The first order of business, we will reduce corporate taxes from 25% to 20% to try to boost the economy. We will remove the import duties on raw materials and machinery so that we can boost production. We can collect the revenue when the companies produce, employ more people, pay taxes, and we will get the revenue. We will eliminate the special import levy. We will abolish the VAT on imported medicines not produced in Ghana. We will abolish the VAT on financial services so that we can get more people into the banking system. We will also abolish the VAT on real estate so that we can get the mortgage market working. We will abolish the VAT on domestic airline tickets. And we will reduce the VAT on micro and small enterprises from the current 17.5% to a 3% flat rate that we introduced when we were in office. The 3% flat rate we introduced, it was increased to 17.5%. It is a major problem for small businesses, and we will revert to the 3%. The ensuing increase in production and economic growth arising from a streamlining as well as elimination of some of these taxes will more than compensate for any short-term interim revenue shortfall. Growth is expected to increase to double digits by 2018. Indeed, during the tenure of the n.p.p. between 2001 and 2008, corporate taxes were slashed from 32% to 25%, and tax revenue actually increased. The data shows that notwithstanding the high level of taxes that this government has imposed, notwithstanding all those taxes, revenue shortfall for the first half of this year is 700 million Ghana cedis. Notwithstanding all the taxes. Additional sources of higher tax revenue or fiscal space to finance these tax reductions will include a broadening of the tax base as a result of the formalization of the economy. As we increase all national IDs, you formalize the economy and you will see the tax base broadening. In addition, we will reduce government expenditure as a result of increased collaboration with the private sector and a prioritization of government expenditure. This government is trying to do too much. If it really partners properly with the private sector, all these expenditures that these taxes are supposed to finance will not be on the back of government, but the private sector will undertake them on our collective behalf. So we will not need as much taxes. We will also bring down interest rates. Just a 2% reduction in interest rates, for example, we'll be able to finance teacher and nursing training allowances. Just 2%. The elimination. We are also expecting an increase in oil and gas revenues from the TEN and Sankofa oil fields, and the elimination of corruption, especially in the procurement of goods and services, which is estimated at some 1.5% of GDP annually. And you can see that you are spending 2 to 3 times project costs. If you eliminate corruption in procurement, you will save a lot of money. The Auditor General's report, for example, tells us that between 2012 and 2014, 5.9 billion Ghana cedis cannot be accounted for. It's vanished into thin air. Collectively, these measures will more than exceed any shortfall in revenue from the reduction in taxes that we are going to propose. Mr. Chairman, as part of the job creation agenda, the n.p.p. believes in empowering the Ghanaian private sector, the local private sector. We will pass legislation, Mr. Chairman, to require that at least 70% of all taxpayer-financed contracts and procurements be executed by local corporate entities. In addition, the n.p.p. will introduce a policy requiring that at least 30% of this required 70%, as far as possible, be sourced from entities owned by the youth, women, and people with disabilities. Furthermore, Mr. Chairman, the n.p.p. will use resources of the country to build an inclusive economy where every village, constituency, or district has access to a minimum set of basic amenities and opportunities. The n.p.p. will reorient national capital expenditure. The national capital expenditure.
I'll use this one. Okay, this is working now. Sika, you're spending on bus branding. Esu ye nisika, ye school feeding. NHIS, Sylvester Mason, were killing. I confirm to the Burkina away flying. Sika pin for the Bia, yes, bush burning. And check Saddam Penny for no Beko prison. Why you median the time, so Chale, you just leave him. Mekwakan, yes, Kwame A+ career dying. Me ye too popular. Me te se kum bagia. Me rap no to akoma. Me the sum kasa. DJ Yanko. Enti Debbie me se mo sa ben bebom.
Ghana my yeah bro. Anybody shall can see I in this way. It's what I antia.
n.p.p.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please resume your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Please resume your seats. Change is coming. Change is coming. Change is coming. And now, please join me as we welcome His Excellency John Agyekum Kufuor. President Kufuor would address us from where he is, so please resume your seats so that he addresses us from where he is.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you would agree with me that n.p.p. doesn't need to issue a manifesto for the oncoming election. Dr. BAWMIA has said it all. His statement has been so comprehensive, he didn't leave anything out. And the choice really is the people's. When you are not well and you go and see a physician who is able to diagnose your problems, you get the diagnosis, would you leave him and go to another doctor for a solution or treatment? So, NPP has made a statement. What I will tell you is that Dr. BAWMIA is not alone. He comes out of a group. And the mark of leadership is the leader who is able to pick people like BAWMIA. We heard him. He was speaking for his flag bearer and for all of us in NPP. And I want to assure Ghana that if Ghana should meet with destiny on 7th December the way it should meet, then Ghana will come out of the very deep hole onto level ground. And as we heard the speaker address, I believe within 2-3 years we'll all see the difference for the positive. So let's go away happy that Ghana has got people like BAWMIA and the team from which he's coming to turn to. We talk of change coming. If we do not know where the change is going to come from, then I say let's be careful. But we are not going to leap out of the dark. We know where the change is coming from. So let Ghana give NPP the chance and we'll see. We'll see. I want to thank Dr. BAWMIA for the exhaustive work he's done. Economics has been described as the dismal science. This man is so endowed by nature, he's able to reduce this dismal science into an entertainment. This